Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Well, Alexis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Arlena. I'm very excited to be here.
Yay. Well, it's so funny because I feel like this is a long time coming.
Yeah, it feels like a full circle moment, actually.
That's it.
Yeah, kind of. Like if I think back to how many years ago when I first met you and saw you on this screen,
Yeah.
where I was at that point, right?
How long has it been?
Oh my gosh, was it 2021?
Was it? Was it? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 21 or 22.
That's amazing. And we met because you came to me for coaching. Did you find me through the podcast?
I found you through Mandy Manners.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
She was a referral. Yeah, so shout out to her because
Shout out to
she was
Mandy.
my
I love
very
Mandy.
first, yeah, she was my very first coach. And then she was like, actually, you know what? I think Arlena is the one to sort of take you to the next step, which
Wow.
I just admire that doing that so much. And yeah, and then I called you and it was like ding. And then like the rest is history.
I know. Well, it's so funny because when you meet your people, you tend to bring out the best in each other, and like when it clicks, it just clicks. And I feel like, a lot of people who seek therapy, sometimes people go to like one therapist and it doesn't work out, and they go, oh, that's like or some people go to AA and they go to one meeting and they're like, oh, this isn't a fit. And they think that's the whole thing, right? But like every therapist brings something different, and and they're just people that we click with. And I felt that with you immediately, that I was like, oh, this is my girl.
You could see through the sludge.
Yeah, well,
What felt like it.
yeah, it's a felt experience, right? I could tell that you were highly motivated, that you're very intellectual, that you're very serious about your self-care. And, you're one of those, I tend to attract people that are highly responsible
Mm,
and take a lot of action. I don't work with people who are sort of stuck in like the victim mentality. And to be fair, like we all
yeah,
have areas where we feel like powerless or victimized by life in some ways. But
yeah,
it's much easier to get a highly responsible person to back off, although it's still challenging because we have trust
right.
we have trust issues.
Yes.
You and I are a lot alike in that we feel validation through achievement, right? Seeking. Is that fair?
Totally fair and probably still slightly true today.
It will always
You
be
know,
true to some
it's
degree.
probably always going to be true. And that's the interesting thing is navigating that now
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about like where you're at now, and all the stuff that you're into. You're doing a lot for the recovery community, and just really I love that you're just so like saturated in the whole, self-help and evolving, and we'll talk about all the things. Let's
Yes.
but we're going to play the lightning round, which is
Woohoo!
what?
The thing that takes the longest time.
Yeah. I was just telling somebody else that you totally called me out for it, and I was like, yeah, I can't help it. I,
That's
I
like
got,
the best part is when you say that.
is it? It's so
That's the
funny
best.
because I don't even the term like the lightning round came from, I think it was like James Lipton when he did Inside the Actor Studio. He would
Mm.
close, but he would use it as a closing. They would wrap up with like, if you walk through the pearly gates and meet God, what do you want God to say to you? And everybody get all weepy and that he's proud
Right.
of me. That's all anybody ever wants is that validation. But I like to shoot this from a different angle because we're talking, I like to see everything through the lens of recovery. So, I'll ask you, when you first got sober, was there a book that really spoke to you or helped you early on?
Yes. The book was Mother Hunger.
Oh,
This was
yes.
the first, I believe this was, it's a little murky, like early day sobriety memory is a little murky, but this I remember, I think this was the first book that you referred to me Mother Hunger by Kelly McDaniel. Um, I would put on my ear pods and walk and listen to that book and just sob. It was early on, I think we discovered I had sort of a maternal wound.
Mhm.
Would you say? Like, I um was really looking for some form of nurturing. And, I had, also, I think we talked a lot about my guilt as a single mother of two girls. I had a lot of guilt of drinking throughout. At that point, it was my kids' entire lives, right?
Yeah.
And so there were like many different layers and sort of these different wounds that I think of that book kind of like surgery. Like, it's like I kind of needed to be opened up
Yeah.
and operated on, and that's kind of what that book did initially. So it was like gut wrenching and heart wrenching, but then I could kind of start to repair from that.
Yeah.
So
No,
that
that's
book,
beautiful. Yeah.
man, I recommend that book to anybody that has some sort of a maternal type of wound, if you know
What,
that you do.
well, what was so interesting about that is, I had something similar. I feel like as little girls, we desperately want our mother's approval. The mother is the archetype of and the example of how we're supposed to be. It's the nurturing, it's the fulfillment. If you have a critical mother, I had a critical mother, then that sort of instills this need for achievement, right? We just talked about it.
Exactly.
And
I
so it sort of
totally
hardwires us that way.
100%. And I think I was interested in learning how to nurture myself. How, because I felt like I couldn't go to the source. So how can I give myself that nurturance?
Yeah.
And that took me to my second book, which was Roar Like a Goddess by Achurya Shanya. She's in California. She's an Ayurvedic guru, or, she's amazing. And that book was really about, it was like I was sort of on this like emotional roller coaster, and that book was like, yeah, like it was empowering and sort of building me back up. And one thing that, man, it just gives me goosebumps to think about is, so she talks a lot about the goddess, and in Hindu religion there's many different goddesses, and so I would imagine them wrapping their arms around me and nurturing me. And that was one way that I could get through the really tough times, man. Because in the beginning, woo, like it was hard to not drink. Ooh.
Was
So,
it?
oh man.
So before I met you, that's when, because after I met you, I didn't feel so much that you were really, I don't recall, and maybe this is just me with rose-colored glasses. You do present as very strong. Like you
Mm,
can be very stoic about your pain, and you can speak very bluntly and matter of fact about some things that I would just be like over on this side of the screen. I'm just like, crumpling for you. It's like, wow, that is so painful. Just be super stoic about your own, like kind of dissociated from your own pain. So I don't
yes.
recall you struggling with cravings all that much because it was like you had made the decision and you just wanted some additional support about how to navigate like all the stress, or you were running a business that was super stressful, you hated it. And so, but I don't remember, you really struggling with the not drinking part. What was sort of like the
Mm.
motivate? What did it for you that you were like, I have to stop drinking?
To be honest, like I would not be here. It was to the point where I wanted to end my life. Like the depression was so bad, the nothing mattered. Um, I actually felt that I would be a better parent by not existing.
Mm.
Um, that thought went through my head a lot. And I don't know what was the moment. I think I was sitting by the pool. I don't know. There was just a moment, and it was just like you pick a road. Which road am I going to go down? And I feel like the irony of the situation is like I owned a spa and I was really enveloped in the wellness space, and yet I was so
Yeah.
unwell, and I really despised myself. And the accomplishment part of it just wasn't enough anymore to sustain me, you
Yeah.
know? And yeah, and I think I focused on vanity in the beginning
Mm.
because I was gaining weight rapidly. The amount of beer, I don't know if I can talk about what I was drinking, if that's like
Yeah, talk about
triggering
whatever
or
you want.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's your
Yeah,
story.
yeah, like I can't even believe I consumed that much
How much
fluid.
were you
Never
fluid?
mind. Just
Man,
never
we are
mind.
dedicated.
Yeah.
Dedicated.
Like
Try to get your water consumption of the day. That's a challenge, but alcohol, it's
oh
amazing how
yeah,
easily that goes down.
I could fit that in, no problem. Like now I'm like, man, I gotta drink 2 liters of water. Oh,
Were you drinking 2 liters of beer?
oh, at least, at least.
That's so funny. I
And
didn't think of you as a you. I wouldn't imagine you. You're so like refined and polished. I would imagine
oh
you
my
like
gosh,
a bougie wine drinker.
it's so interesting. Like when you say refined and polished, like I don't see myself that way at all. I just see myself as like a mess.
People watching the YouTube version of this are going to be like, she doesn't seem polished.
That's so funny. Oh
What's
yeah,
that
I
mean?
think it's mentally.
Right. Yeah.
I've like taught myself maybe very well how to present very well, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
mentally, it's a shit
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
But
Behind
I'm
the
along.
scenes.
I'm along for the ride now, so it's
Yeah.
good.
That's good.
But yeah,
Okay, so you're
yeah,
drinking mass volumes of beer and you're gaining weight.
yeah, so rapidly. And so yeah, I had the spa, and so that was a big pressure. Was I stopped? So I used to like hold events and retreats, and it's so funny. I would do yoga retreats and meditation retreats, and I'd be half in the bag. But I stopped doing that because I was getting quite overweight, and I looked like shit. I mean, like you
Your
could
skin
my
get, yeah, alcohol
this
is not your friend when it comes to skin. And you had a, so your spa was focused on skincare. Is that
yes,
right?
yeah,
It's all
that's right.
skincare stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So it's so
Yep.
funny because, wellness is a funny thing because we can talk about, I remember I interviewed this one gal and I asked her about her self-care routine and she was newly sober and all she talked about was like getting her hair and nails done and getting facials. And I was like, that's not, I guess that's part of self-care, caring for your physical body. But I always think of, prayer, meditation, journaling, self-reflection, you know,
Yes.
healing
Yeah.
your trauma stuff. Like to me, that's self-care. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's like the deeper work. So wellness can be very superficial. But listen, if vanity gets you sober, then that works.
I mean, yay for vanity. Like, thank God, right?
Yes,
Like
yes,
who
ma'am.
I don't care what the hell what the reason is for wanting to get sober. Like who cares? Like just go
Yeah,
with it in the beginning. Like,
yeah,
like I have a real problem with trying to make things complicated when they don't need to
yes,
be,
yeah.
or
We do have.
confusing. You know
We,
what?
we we
Like,
do have a way of complicating things. We are sort of complex creatures because we do have a lot of complexity in our lives, right?
yes.
We have a
Yeah.
lot of childhood programming that we're overcoming. And speaking of self-care routines, do you have like a daily self-care routine, or is it like do you think of it as like things that you do over a week, or how does that look like for you? Maybe you still incorporate retreats. I know you've been on some interesting retreats lately.
Oh my God, yeah.
The
Yeah.
vagina retreat. We won't talk about that one.
Yeah, that one was my favorite, by the way, just
Yeah,
so you
okay,
know.
we'll talk about that.
But actually that retreat, that like goddess mermaid woman's retreat, came helped me with some of my favorite journal prompts. So
Oh, nice.
journaling is my that is sort of a non-negotiable
A daily practice.
daily. So, yeah. Okay, so my morning routine got a little insane where I was like, okay, I can't I'm busy until 11 a.m. It took hours.
I know. Yeah. It
So I
does.
was like,
Overachiever, typical overachiever trap.
I wish you like I had like a checklist, like,
Oh God, I love a
and
checklist.
right, it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's very
Um,
satisfying.
but like I'm also a huge rebel. So I rebelled against that and I was like, fuck you. Like even when I tell myself to do something, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm not gonna do that. Like so it was awesome for a while, but then I completely rebelled and I was kind of doing nothing and I felt
Hmm.
exhausted
All or nothing.
and
Yeah, can't relate.
all or nothing. And so what I did was, and this is so interesting, it's because the tools that I use to train my staff, I kind of started to bring into my own life. And so when I spoke to them, I was like, you know, when you're doing a facial, like you have a toolbox and you have all these modalities in your toolbox that you can pull out sort of as needed. And like as an esthetician, that makes your job fun. And I was like, well, I'm going to do that for my morning routine. Um, so like journaling is in there. And then within journaling, there's different prompts.
Yeah.
So like two of my favorite now are what's my pleasure diet today? So
Oh,
what am I, right? It's super fun. So what am I
jotting that
doing?
down.
Yeah, what is my pleasure diet? It doesn't have to be sexual or anything like that. Like it could be like I'm going
Can
to
be.
eat like a strawberry and be
Hmm.
whatever the hell it is, if it's your skincare routine.
Okay, I want to get into this a little bit just because there are those of us who are like, all work and no play. Like I am
Mm,
so like I lean towards the workaholic tendency.
yes.
And so play, I remember one time we had a friend stop by the house. Remember back in the day when people would just drop by our house? We had a friend that would
Yeah.
do that. We just drop by the house unannounced.
Right.
Yeah, he asked us, he's like, he goes, what are you guys doing for fun these days? And Bob and I looked at each other like I was like, this guy has like 10 heads. Like, what is this fun thing that you speak of? Like we
Yes,
were
yes,
raising
yes.
kids. We were raising kids and trying to survive in Silicon Valley, which is super expensive. So I love
Oh,
this
wow.
idea of pleasure diet because I think a lot of people, when they get sober, you ask them, well, what is it that you like? Sobriety, the getting sober part is just a short period of time, actually. And then it's like, well, what kind of life do you want to create? Like now, it's a
Mm,
practice of being honest. And then we start to, a lot of people like you, get sober and you realize that you can no longer tolerate things that are not meant for you. Like the spa was a successful business and you were doing really well, but you hated it, right?
yeah.
And
Hmm.
drinking can be such a stress reliever. And I see this a lot. People get sober, then they realize I cannot tolerate the career that I'm in. And so
Yeah.
a lot of people switch careers. So but then you ask them, well, what is it that you want? And they don't know.
And you don't know.
They don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Did you have that
Uh,
experience?
oh, I'm having that experience.
You're all,
Like,
who do I want to be when I grow up?
I love what you're saying about play, and that's kind of where that comes from, that pleasure.
Yeah.
And it's that's one thing I know you and I worked on that
Hmm.
um in our coaching sessions and early on, like at the beginning, I met with you twice a week. Do you remember that?
Was that twice a week?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it was very difficult during the early stages. That's why I
Yeah.
had to meet with you so frequently because I needed that
Mhm.
like touchstone.
Yeah.
But so going back to the childhood thing, and this is another thing that I'm doing as part of my morning routine, is trying to remember the time before I felt unsafe. So like
Right.
from age 6 and earlier, I had I remember a real sense of play, of curiosity, safety. You know what I mean? Like just that
Yeah.
warm, like childhood
Carefree.
climbing trees and whatever the hell else it was I was doing.
Yeah.
And and I'm still on this path of self-discovery. And now it's a fine line because I've been sober now 3 years. So maybe it's time to step off a little bit. Like how much self-discovery can one possibly have?
Well, it turns out, here's the thing about
Like,
self-discovery, right?
yeah.
Is that we continue to grow and change and evolve. And as we evolve, we actually address problems differently and new things arise, right? So, so I'm middle age, I'm menopause, we're not empty nesters, but my boys are in their early 20s. I'm different, my life is different, and then the challenges that life presents are different, which always requires us to go back inside.
Mm,
Right, because stress is a funny thing. It takes you back to your default setting. Like when you're young and you experience stress, you develop survival skills, right? Like we learned that when you were young, you would get stressed out, you would develop survival skills. Achievement is one of those things, right? And so you became highly intellectual. Like nobody's coming to save me. I need to figure this out for myself. No one's coming to rescue me. I need to figure it out. So that you became very strong intellectually. You learned to dissociate from your feelings. You learn to take a lot of action, take a lot of responsibility, right? Um,
yeah,
but the core message is I'm alone, right? No one's coming to help. And so there's a lack of trust in the world, and the world is not a safe place. And so as an adult, if you get stressed out, we revert, your amygdala, your fear center takes your brain offline. We go into flight or fight and we go back to our survival skills. That's how we're hardwired. And so
mm,
all the work that you've been doing, the journaling, the exercise, I know you have like this long checklist of self
yeah,
self-care options that you have. I was in the same boat. I had to do the same thing where I had to whittle it down. Now it's three things. Like I have this huge toolbox. If they otherwise, you're right. You could get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and not be done with your self-care routine at till 11.
yeah, yeah. And then you're done for the day.
And then you're emotionally exhausted. You're like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
done. But yeah, so I've kind of whittled it down to like, okay, I'm just going to put a time limit on this and do three things because then the self-care becomes another thing that we beat ourselves up about.
yeah. So when you're talking, that's what came up for me actually, because I kind of one of the things you said to me early on, like one of our first sessions that no one had said to me before was, "You're so hard on yourself." And that's always stuck with me, and I think that's my default mode is being really
Mm,
hard on myself.
yeah.
And that statement like, well, how much self-discovery can one possibly do in a weird way is me kind of not being that kind to myself. Like I have to
Mhm.
remember I started drinking when I was 13, pretty
Oh,
heavily, drugs and alcohol from age 13. I didn't quit until I was 43. It's
yeah,
decades and decades of all the things that you just said, disassociating, isolating, like that whole list.
yeah.
And I'm supposed to be better in 3 years.
No, that's not reasonable.
It's not reasonable.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you remember, we talked a lot about learning how to be an adult. Like, how do I regulate my emotions even? I didn't know how to do that. I'm still learning how, like, if I get angry, like, geez, I've come a really far way. Like, I'm not undermining my progress, but like, oops, I have I have like tiny little ears, like
Your
the
earbuds
earbuds.
fell
I have like the tiniest like option for the earbud and they still fall out. Um, but yeah, so I'm just saying like trying to be gentle on
Yeah.
yourself when there's so much to learn. Whew.
Yeah, it really literally is like a never-ending thing. But I understand what you're saying though, because I feel like and I feel like you always had really good instincts, right? Like you have this what you're talking about is a need for balance underneath all that. And I
Mhm.
think it's so easy to get lost in the self-discovery and digging up the past and trying to analyze it. There is so much value in like when you were talking about the Mother Hunger book, it was like, oh, that is the thing like that's the original core wounding, right? Like
Mm,
not, and it all sort of boils down to not being safe, not being good enough, not being, lovable, right? Those are all the underpinnings of like what happens to us if we don't get what we need when we're really little.
Yeah.
that nurturing, right? And so it's like, oh, now it all makes sense. But and it's like, it's not my fault, right? Like
Mm,
that is sort of like the extrapolation of like when you like figure out you're an alcoholic, when you or you have alcohol use disorder, like whatever kind of language you want to couch it in. It's like, oh, this is a thing, and other people have this thing, so it's like I'm not alone, right?
yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it's not my fault, which is something I feel like everybody needs to like. That was like the one thing I wish I knew when I first got sober is that it wasn't my fault. But then it becomes this awareness that it's my responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
and you are highly responsible. So I think, for someone like you, having like the self-knowledge is actually really important. But
Mm,
you are somebody who takes a lot of action. Like there's the saying in Alcoholics Anonymous of self-knowledge avails us nothing. It's about the actions that we take, and you are highly action oriented, which is why I felt like you progressed so quickly. Like I felt like you
mm,
went from like sad and lost and, um, in pain to um, not shying away from pain. It's not like the pain really ever goes away, but you get strong, like you got stronger. You got stronger pretty quick, it seemed like. Well, that's what
yeah.
I'm sure, like on your end, it didn't feel like it was fast. Is that true?
Well, I mean, it didn't feel as fast because to me, it was like decades of trying.
Oh, yeah. Had you been trying to quit drinking for decades or just trying to feel
Oh,
better?
oh, well, that's a good question. I think trying to quit, I think just I would never, ever, ever have called myself an alcoholic ever. But it was, I did all the things like the dry January, all the 30-day challenges. I went to an ashram for 30 days. I would try constantly to do these things to quit, and it almost backfired in a way because I was like, "Oh, yeah." And I didn't drink when I was pregnant or nursing my children either, but it would always, like, come back in. It
Yes,
always snuck its way back in.
very insidious
And,
that way.
yeah, but it did feel like trying. I think it did feel like trying.
Yeah. So you, at what point did you decide that your drinking was a problem?
Like, at the time, I probably wouldn't have framed it this way, but looking back, I was so out of line with, like, my values. And, like, maybe that's sort of like a coachy way to say it, but, like, I just as I said, I despised myself and I just didn't know why. And I would say I'm broken.
Mm.
I'm broken. Like, I thought I was, I don't know how else to say it,
Yeah.
and it was, that's why the coaching is so great. It's like at that point, you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And when you have someone say to you, well, maybe you're not broken. Like maybe
It's
it's this other
wounded.
thing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
wounded, not broken.
And to me, that's what it does is it sort of puts you, it takes a two-dimensional objects and turns it into this three-dimensional thing that you can move around and, oh, gee, I didn't see it from this angle, like, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of that wound that you're talking about early on, you know, from childhood, I I think I was stuck in a victimhood, and I was
Mm.
a lot of blaming
Yeah.
myself first. And I think that's why that book, like Mother Hunger and things like that, were so good because I needed to move past that. I needed to, not to say that
Mhm.
any behavior was okay, but to understand it and not blame, and try to find a semblance of compassion for especially my parents who didn't
Yeah.
behave the way I would have wanted them to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting. Maybe that book for you validated your feelings because there's this idea that we can't move past feeling the negative feelings until they're validated. And I think that's
Mm.
often the value. Like I remember working when I was in corporate working in an HR department and they had came in and did this training and they're like, you know, in HR, people call to complain about to complain about everything.
Yeah.
Right. They call HR to complain about everything. It's like health issues and sometimes they're really scary things, but people are like really emotionally charged.
Mm.
And the training was they called it demonstrate awareness. And really, it's like, oh, I could see how you would feel that way. They would say, don't tell somebody like, I know how you feel, because that isn't, that will, that's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Don't ever tell anybody, you know, they would say, demonstrate awareness, meaning, oh, I could see how that would be a painful experience for you. And it would seem like as soon as because people need to feel seen, heard, and understood. And when you validate somebody's negative feelings, it's like, yeah, you have every right, it's very reasonable to be angry about this. Then people can stop. Like the reason people yell in arguments is because they don't feel like they're being heard. So they yell, right?
Yes.
And
Oh
so
yeah.
yeah. So when and I tell this to guys all the time too. I go, you know what she wants to hear? I could see how you'd feel that way. Wow, that must have been really hard for you. Like we don't want solutions. We want acknowledgement and validation of our pain. Everybody, the truth of the matter is we all have the answers inside us, but sometimes you just need somebody to validate your pain. And I think
Oh,
books like Mother
100%.
Hunger, it's like, yeah, this is a thing. It's valid. And no wonder. No wonder.
Yeah. And I think probably a lot of people can relate to that isolation.
Oh yeah.
And like y- you know, I or we're already introverted. And then very, very much, as I said, I stopped doing the events. I stopped showing up on camera. I even stopped like going to the business. I hid away. And then when you do that, you're the only one operating. And so when you do work with someone, I mean, we're in two different countries, like we met over a
Yeah,
screen. It was it
yeah.
it was during COVID, well, 2020 on the
It
tail end
was
of
yeah, it was after.
it was
Yeah, because
just
you were
after.
back in the spa. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
you had an event. I'll let you finish your thought, but like don't let me forget because there was you had something going on that you wanted to prepare for.
well, I was just gonna say, like, agreeing with you about that validation, like
Yeah,
to have someone say to you, I can see how you would feel that way. Like it seems so minute or whatever, but it's quite
huge.
earth shattering and it sort of cracks open that isolation bubble. And you're like, and just to get that little bit of light shining in, sometimes that's all you need is just that little bit of light to just, oh, like it's really phenomenal. I mean, it saved my life. Like the coaching saved my life.
Oh, I love hearing
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, how come you didn't go to AA?
I
Were there not,
tried.
was there nothing in your area that felt right?
So at that point, so as I said, over the years, I had gone to AA meetings. And so I feel like a different person than I was then. I was extremely judgmental. Now I had a business that was on a very busy street. I had a lot of media, like I was on TV and stuff. And I was sometimes in the newspaper and things like that. And so I felt like I couldn't like, so that was a huge barrier was like, if I go, someone's going to see me and they're going to be like, oh, she owns a spa. Like she talks about wellness. Like, look at what a hypocrite. That word to me is like,
Imposter. Yeah.
yeah. And but I did end up going and they were it was almost like what you see on TV, like with these dingy church basements. They were mostly men. And
Yeah, on TV. Yeah.
was like, I did not want to be around men. And it was these
Yeah.
stories, like I was a very high functioning, I was winning awards, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I
Uh-huh.
was making over six figures. Like I just felt like I didn't fit in. And I was
Yeah.
like, it was a lot of men who were very that like typical rock bottom that you hear about like in Hollywood kind of thing.
Isn't that funny that, yeah, I always, that's why I wrote the book because like social media and, social media puts out all these really negative portrayals of what meetings are like. And by the way, meetings are not the program. That's the actual steps are the program, right? But
Mm.
everyone thinks that if you go to AA meetings, that's the program, and it's not. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. But you mentioned like movies and stuff portray the alcoholic as the old white guy with the rock bottom story, the dingy basements, and so you go and you're like, oh my God, that's what this is.
Well, that's what I saw. That's
That's
what
what
I
you
was looking
saw.
for,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? I didn't
It's
see
like,
the
yeah.
humanity. I didn't see the all the other beautiful things. And it probably wasn't that bad of a basement. I went once,
Yeah.
made up my mind, and I didn't go. When I was in the country, when you and I met, I did a woman's online thing. I just didn't feel like it was sort of like I felt like my story wasn't harrowing enough. Like it was like
Mhm.
I had to be more.
Like contemplating suicide is not, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know, right? But like, what I know it. You're trying to make sense of something that you can't. Like
Yeah.
that thought process is not logical, but that was what the thought process was. Well, look
Yeah.
around me. I've got a beautiful 5-acre property. I've got a pool. Like I've got a business. Like I don't fit in with these. Like it's ego. It's judgment.
It's so funny because that's so bougie, right? Like it's so bougie, and you're like, I don't see myself as bougie. But you're like, I'm not like those people.
Yeah, but like I think that's kind of me being a bit of a prick, right?
No,
Totally.
not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Listen, to be perfectly honest, I went to meetings in the bougie part of town because that's what I related to. Like I was like, I want to be like those people. I wanted to be like, I went to meetings with professionals that were like CEOs of like Fortune 500 companies, lawyers, doctors, professionals, but there was all kinds of people at those meetings. There was still like the rock bottom, like the chronic relapsers. So it was like a mix. But if you go to
Hmm.
the nice part of town, you do tend to get a better cross section. Listen to me. But do you know what I mean? It's like I wanted people that I aspire to be like.
I think, yeah. So coming at it now from a nicer lens or whatever, it's I just want to be with people who are like me.
Yeah.
Not because I'm better than anybody else, but because I understand the story.
Yeah.
And you can just, it's easier to connect, I think, when you meet other single women who are entrepreneurs. Like, so you understand running a business and being a high functioning drunk.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of skills.
Yeah, that really is the thing. And I do have clients who are very high functioning who feel guilty about sharing how they really feel, knowing that they're in a very privileged position. And I don't even think privilege is the right word because those are people who work really hard and have earned they have
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
earned, like, you work really hard, so you earned your comfort, basically, I guess you could say. And I was in a similar position where I had a nice job. I had like a nice sales position. I was making good money. I never had a DUI, but I was broken on the inside. But I needed to
Yeah.
talk about, and I see this with a lot of high achieving people that struggle with alcohol is they feel if they're not rock bottom, they feel guilty about sharing their pain because
That's right.
yeah,
Yes.
so you kind of
Yeah.
need to go and talk to other people who are sick like us in the same
And
ways.
it's a journey, right? So, like, just like I'm saying, like in the beginning, if vanity is the thing that's propelling you forward, then fine. If it, don't worry about the guilt of who you're talking to, because that
Hmm.
I use that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, but fuck it. Like, just do what
Yeah.
the hell ever you need to do. Like,
Yeah.
and try not to make things too confusing. And just if, you know, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I
There's
feel
the whole an acronym for KISS. I like to say, keep it simple, sweetie. I know people say that it's stupid, but I don't like that. But it's like, we got to keep it simple.
sweetie.
keep it simple, sweetie.
Aw, that's cute.
Yeah. We do need to just simplify things because we are complicated people. We have there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Hmm.
And so we do tend to complicate things and it's important to remember just like the basic principles, like, one day at a time, like that's one of the themes of my sobriety is to just keep it simple one day at a time. Do you have a mantra or an idea that you return to often?
Yeah, I do. It's just this.
Oh my
And
God.
so I remember taking it seconds at a time, and that's not a
Okay.
joke.
Okay.
And I specifically remember literally white knuckling. I was driving my car and I was like, oh, because I had to drive everywhere. I was in the country and oh man, that beer store, like it would call my name, right? And I would have to pull over and just be like, just this. And I would like observe, what did I see? What did I smell? And it would pass. But sometimes I'm doing it again 30 seconds later. Like
Yeah, but
just
that was like
this.
being present.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Like one of my closest, longest friends, she had just this tattooed on her forearms. Just
Yeah.
this, just this.
Like it's simple. It's I don't know. It's really stuck with me, and it's some variation of that now. Um, I notice I still drive myself slightly crazy with my thoughts, and just like whoa, like slow down here, like you know,
What helps
bring
you
yourself
with
back.
what help and this comes up a lot in people that I coach and people that I talk to is the overactive thinking, like the constant, like figuring things out. I feel like that's a trauma response. Um, and I know you had a fair amount as you were growing up, but do you have, so is the journaling something that helps empty your mind so that it doesn't overwhelm you? What do you do to mitigate the overthinking?
I'm sure the journaling helps. I'm sure it does. Um, it's that I think a meditation has been the biggest. Like, if someone was to ask me, like, what would be the two things, you would tell someone to adapt for their sobriety journey or recovery journey or whatever, I'd say journaling or, some creative outlet and meditation.
A creative outlet like a hobby?
Like for me, it's writing. So like I write poetry. So one of the things in my
Oh,
toolbox is,
wow.
is reading poetry and like an
Mhm.
actual book. So there's part of that I like that romance of that too.
Yeah.
Just reading
Yeah.
some poetry and then more I have some glasses. Like I just like everything about it. Like I got some cute glasses because I'm going
Yeah.
blind.
You would be all intellectual. So,
Yeah.
what would you say to somebody who is like, I can't meditate? Because I hear that a lot. What would you say to someone that says, I can't meditate?
Um, well, I mean, I'd have to call bullshit on that. I mean, what I would say is, so what I did was I started at 30
Okay.
seconds, 60 seconds, two
Just start.
minutes.
Okay. 60
And the other,
seconds or 2 minutes. And I think the people misunderstand what meditation is. They think it's clearing your
yeah,
mind of thought. So if like you have an overactive mind and you hear, oh, you need to meditate, people are like, I can't even shut this up to, I can't do it for 2 minutes.
can't do it. Yeah.
That is not the goal. The goal of meditation is to focus on your breath. Like I had a guy come on and talk about 12 breaths. Someone's like, can you just count your 12 breaths? And that's how he started. And then he went to like,
Hmm.
yeah, and then he went to like an hour or something like that. Like he meditates in silence for an hour. And he started out and he was like he was on the amphetamine side. He was like on the speed side. And so talk about an overactive mind, right? That's where he said 12 breaths, just count, breathe in and then release and then do that 12 times. And he's like, I can do that. And that's where he started.
Yeah. I find like you've got to find what it is for you.
Yeah.
Um, early on, the breathing, I was very dissociated from my body. Like I would say I could not feel anything from here down. And actually, the breathing made me panic. And
Oh.
so, yeah, so that's where a mantra was really good for me because if I
Mm.
focused on my breath, I got scared. It freaked me out.
Yeah.
It was too much. I remember like laying on my floor early days. Now, because I spent that 30 days in an ashram, I had, um, like a Sanskrit mantra that I
Mhm.
still use to this day,
Oh, wow.
just to calm and just repeat it over and over.
Is it a secret? Like I know, like in transcendental meditation, you get like a word or something you're not supposed to share it. Are you allowed to share your mantra?
Oh, yeah, it's Om Namah Shivaya.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know that one.
So, yeah. So breathe in and then Om Namah Shivaya. And then, like now, the breath is easy for me, but back then, yeah.
Interesting.
And that's, slowly through the meditation because, and then the other thing too is where you place your mind. So you could do like body scans, like I'm going to place my mind in my big toe on my left foot or something like
Yeah, that's
that
like
helps.
yoga nidra.
That's a form of meditation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's different kinds. I
I
think I
think
think
so.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like I think people like, I'm like, oh, there's different kinds of meetings. You know, there's
Yeah.
different there's different kinds of meditation. I've heard of people doing walking meditation.
Oh, that was huge for me too. Yes.
Yeah.
Love walking meditations because then you notice like the flowers, all the beautiful stuff around you. I would bawl my eyes out because I was like, I can't believe I missed this beauty around me, and that becomes that's where the pleasure and the joy from sobriety come.
Yeah.
Is that noticing and when instead of beating yourself up for not noticing, you're like, oh, look at me now. I'm noticing it now. And this is so great.
Yeah, noticing without judgment, with self-compassion. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Silencing that
enjoying
inner
it.
critic. Yeah, and
Yeah.
enjoying it.
Yeah. So
Part of your
much beauty.
pleasure diet. Um, can we shift gears a little bit and talk about, there was a couple of things that, I know you were in the health and wellness space. You talked about you were gaining weight, and when you and I first met, you were like, I know that some people, um, you know, will relapse, and you didn't want to relapse, but do you want to talk about why you were afraid to relapse or the
Sure.
procedure you were going to have done?
Yeah, absolutely. So that goes back to that vanity thing was I decided to have bariatric surgery, which was gastric sleeve. I hope I'm saying that right. Um, because I was almost 100 pounds heavier than I am now.
Oh, you lost 100 pounds.
Well, 80. I mean, 100 sounds 80 is pretty good too.
80 is a lot. Yeah.
Like a whole other person,
It is a whole other person, a little person.
a little
Um,
person.
but you had gotten some counseling that a lot of people that have weight loss surgery will then switch addictions because like food, there is a thing like an eating disorder around food addiction. And so they were cautioning you that you should get some support because a lot of people go, like I was just telling you before we hit record that I had a friend who he and his sister had weight loss surgery at the same time, and they both started drinking alcoholically. Both started abusing alcohol, but he had a wife that said, if you don't stop drinking, I'm going to leave you. She didn't have anybody, and he got sober and she died.
It's terrifying.
So, like, switching addictions early in recovery is a thing. And so it sounded to me like that, like they had cautioned you to get support, not to drink, because you could easily go that way.
Like, to be brutally honest, no one cautioned me. I actually
Really?
think that, yeah, I actually think that is, they give you literature and stuff that says like you need to, if you drink afterwards, you can only have like this many, no talk of problem drinking or anything at all. That
Wow.
was sort of that was my choice to do that because for what you're saying, I knew from reading the literature, if I drank, I could not drink normally. I knew
Oh,
that.
you already knew that about yourself?
I already knew that. So I'm like, if I and you get drunk really easily
Yeah.
after, while that sounded kind of fabulous at the, I'm like,
To be honest.
yeah,
That's
I
a
don't have
some
to
money.
drink,
Save me some money.
right? So like, but the trade-off would have just been way too great. Like for the
Yeah.
5 minutes of high I would have had or whatever, like it
Yeah.
just the trade-off just was not there. And then I did know that I had a lot to live for. And it's funny because you can believe and know a lot of things at the same time. So while, there was that part of me that was like, I don't want to live anymore, there are just always that other part that's like, there's magic in the world. I have a lot of
Mm.
potential. Like I can
Mm.
do great things. So you're kind of, there's that all mixed up into one, right? And so I
Yeah.
did know that, like, and I think initially, so that's why I took the plunge to do the coaching to make
Yeah.
sure I didn't relapse. And so one thing I learned through that whole process is, yeah, I definitely had a food addiction also, or probably still do. And even removing the ability to eat does not take away the reasons why. And that's, I guess for me, that's why I wanted to do coaching, was because I wanted to go to the root cause.
Yeah.
I just the amount of suffer like it didn't take my suffering away. I'm like, oh, if I'm thin, then my answers like I found my life's gonna be easier. I won't suffer anymore because I'm thin.
Yeah. So if I'm thin, then everything will be okay.
No, still
No.
me, God damn it.
I know. I know. I remember. So we did some hypnosis to sort of build like install this sense of worthiness and self-esteem. And it was really difficult to like touch on some of the trauma stuff. There's a lot of reframing of trauma stuff. What did you find to be like the most helpful to because they say you need a sufficient substitute, right? It's drugs and alcohol, food, it's all medication for something deeper. So what do you think made the shift for you in terms of like your healing? What sort of tipped
Mhm.
the scales for you?
Mhm. I think it was the the meditation and the ability to like a spiritual
Mm,
something spiritual.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
almost sort of ineffable, like just a love.
yeah. Love heals, as
Yeah,
cheesy as that sounds.
but I yeah, I just there was no outside thing anymore.
Yeah.
Sitting with your kids and noticing them, feel it, like allowing the feelings. So a woman that you forced me to text message.
I was like, you need a friend.
I
You
know.
need a
I
sober
was
friend. You're so
I was
lonely.
so I was so resistant.
You're like, you
Man,
know
that
what? I decided I'm good. No. And I was like, no, normally I'm not a pushy. I,
no,
I'm
I
like,
know.
I'm like, you have to honor your feelings and, go at your own pace. But this one, I was like, no, you must go.
Well, so like talk about instincts, like you have very good instincts too.
Oh,
And
see, made friends with Jessica.
yeah, so we talk all the time. And anyway, we were talking just the other day actually. We were talking about going through something that's really difficult and how we're noticing that, like, yeah, it sucks and it's so hard what we're going through, but we can see how there's some beauty in it. And like it sounds corny again, maybe, but like look at how we can handle this situation now. And it
Stronger.
makes you feel good. Like, and so you can kind of see the beauty. And one of the things I remember hearing is like people in recovery saying like, oh, it becomes your superpower. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
God, did that ever? I was like, I hate this person so much. Like, just don't
People
even
who
with
would,
me,
yeah,
right?
at meetings, people talk about being a grateful alcoholic. And at first, I was very confused. They
Yes, of
kept calling
course.
bullshit on that.
Yeah. And then now that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, now
I'm
you
like, it's
get
my
it.
superpower. Like, I see people running around freaking out about stuff, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't feel the need to freak out. Like,
Yeah. Isn't
yeah.
yeah, because you're not being triggered. I feel like this idea, this concept of being triggered, what's happening is that we're all walking around with like I call them a soul bruise. Like we're all walking around
Mm,
with these soul bruise. It refers to like an unhealed event in the past. They say if you get triggered,
mm,
if your response is disproportionate to the situation, like somebody just like offhandedly says something and you freak the fuck out,
yeah.
they say if it's hysterical, it's historical, right? And
Mm,
so it has nothing to do with what's going on. People get triggered in like in relationships a lot or around money, right?
yeah.
So somebody says or does something that seems kind of innocuous at surface level, but we freak out. It's like if you have a bruise and somebody touches it or bumps up like it's painful, and that's what being triggered is like. It's like somebody says or does something that hits your soul bruise, and then you rubber band back to the time, but you don't know that that's happening, right? It's all subconscious. It's all very deep, and so
Yeah.
in sobriety we learn this practice of addressing resentments. Like in AA, they talk about in the fourth step. The fourth step is about dealing with resentments. And there's a process to sort of deconstruct it and get down to root causes and conditions. And then you realize,
Mm,
oh, there is this thing that happened in my past, a way of like I had a condescending parent. And anytime somebody is condescending to me, like at a business meeting, I freak the fuck out and don't respond appropriately or professionally. And it's because I had like this old wound in the past that was unresolved. But if I wasn't sober, if I didn't have a process, then I wouldn't know that. And then I wouldn't know that that was the part that needed healing, which is to offer love and compassion and acknowledgement and validation to that sort of younger self. IFS is really good for that. I love
yes.
facilitating that. Um, and then
And
and then next time somebody is condescending to you, like you don't react as much. So while you like you're like and you've done a lot of work, right? So like that scenario that you're talking about that other people are freaking out around you, it's like
mm,
you did your work. So you're unaffected by that because you went back to your past, like you did the self-reflection and the journaling and the all the healing stuff that you did so that it's not controlling you in present day.
right. So, question, do you think someone could go about that work on their own? Or do you think you really need something?
There's that saying that you can't read the label from inside the jar,
Yeah,
and like when you're in the midst of emotional turmoil, it's very difficult to be objective. Emotion colors our perspective. So when you're triggered, I don't think that you can do it alone, not at first, until you have
I mean,
some sort of like I feel like it's just easier to do it with a guide. Like why? Like if you could have figured it out, you would have done it already,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I know. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah,
And I just wish more people knew that and
yeah,
would get help.
sooner.
Like if I had known so early,
I know,
if I had known decades earlier, even in my 30s,
I
like,
know.
I try not to do this to myself, but there still is the guilt of the majority of my life. I feel like I missed out on it, like if I wasn't
Yeah,
high, drunk, or I was hungover.
yeah.
So you can't go back in time, can only move forward, but you do like I can see why people get preachy.
Yeah, and listen, I think that so here's this is why sobriety is a superpower because you have a very specific set of circumstances. You hold guilt in a very specific way, like as a mother, what you could have accomplished. It's hard not to regret. Like, you and I are achievement junkies, so it's like, oh, what could I have accomplished? Or what
Mm,
pain, like all the pain that you suffered, you could have avoided. Um,
mm,
so now that you're holding these ideas in a very specific way that can be useful to somebody else who holds it in that specific way. That's why it's your superpower, right? I don't have that,
mm.
right? Like I had my kid, I got sober young and then I had kids, right? So I didn't ever have the experience of being drunk around my children or being hungover around my children. Now, I will
Right.
confess, I've had the experience of being an asshole in front of my kids. I still have all like the human things
Yes.
of like, and listen, I did that shit not drunk. So what is my excuse? Right.
Mm.
So, we all have, I think as a mom, it's like, we just have guilt as mom. That's our lot in life as,
Yeah, I feel
as
like, yeah.
moms. But I do believe that you are uniquely qualified to help somebody. I can't because I didn't have that experience. Right. So
Right,
it's
right.
turning our pain into purpose. And that is
Mm.
and that is what makes it a superpower.
Yeah,
So there you
that's
go.
really nice.
Yeah, you're like Wonder Woman now with your long hair and your, and your
I
special
just need a
suit.
cape.
All you need is the cake. So funny. So, I didn't want to make the weight loss surgery the focus, but there are so many people listening who I was telling you earlier that the episodes I do around eating disorders and alcohol use disorder and high achievers usually do really well because there are so many people who struggle with all those things, being an achievement junkie and perfectionism and workaholism and striving and struggling for our validation and then we get sober and suddenly we have the opportunity to be able to create the lives we want without the struggling and the suffering. But it is a learning process to try to relax and get into flow instead of pushing and striving and struggling. It's very counterintuitive for people like us.
And I feel like you could, I know this is like surrounded more around alcohol, but that's why it's almost a strange blessing because if it is workaholism, like some of these addictions are very socially accepted,
Oh
but
yeah,
it doesn't
encouraged
mean
even.
encouraged even. It does not mean the suffering is less. And it's like you're saying, like they might think, well, I can't be complaining about working 12-hour days or whatever the thing is, like replace alcohol with something else. This
Yeah.
I feel like the suffering is the same.
Yeah. It's all
And so
self-avoidance.
yeah, yeah.
It's avoidance. It all sort of boils down to avoidance of pain. Did I ever talk to you about the Tara Brach radical self-compassion?
Oh, it's at the
Practice radical.
meditation, the rain meditation.
That's where, well, I think she's the one who does the rain. She kind of popularized it. I think somebody else actually created the rain meditation. Rain stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And if you go to
Hmm.
YouTube and do Tara Brach rain meditation, it's 11 minutes and 31 seconds, approximately.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
one of
that's
the,
a good one. That is like one of the ones I remember you sending me to that, and that was one of
yeah,
the
yeah,
ones I
yeah.
did too. Yeah, early
Yeah,
on.
but
Yeah.
her book is around, she has a book that's called Radical Self-Compassion. I think that's what it is. And it's all about self-avoidance and it's the pain, the internal pain that we're trying to
Mm,
avoid. And
yes.
so it's really never about the alcohol, the food, the men or sex or shopping or what. It's not about that. Those are the symptoms. And what's going on underneath is how do we solve the pain? And typically people are not taught coping skills. They're not taught how to process pain to resolution. So what we
No.
end up uh, finding are things to numb the pain, medicate the pain. So it doesn't matter what the thing is. You mentioned spirituality being a big part of the solution. Looking outside. Well, it's really looking inside. That's a funny thing about like these ideas of God. It's like, well, where is it? Where is God? And I think that it's both internal and external. Like it really is.
Yeah. It's like you go in and then out,
Yeah.
or out and then in.
Yeah, it just kind of
Yeah,
depends.
it's
It both work, but it happens in both ways. So, but just being open to the idea, sort of, in 12-step parlance, they talk about being rocketed into the fourth dimension because it's like
mm,
suddenly like this whole other world opens up. And you've done some really interesting things. I know we're kind of long on time, but you've done some really interesting things in recovery. You're in the health and wellness space still, you're a coach now, and you're doing all this stuff. But you did what I really respect about you, Alexis, is that you have done your own work and you're good with
mm.
weird. Like you've done some
I'm good with weird.
you're so good with weird. Like you look all polished and bougie on the outside, but you're good with weird. You were telling me about this retreat that you did with these women, and I was like, I don't think I could have done that, what you did.
Yeah, it was
Talk a little bit about that fun retreat. Was that in Italy? Where was that?
yeah, it was in Sardinia. It was my friend Meg who she's a pleasure coach, and
Not just sexual, but or both sexual and just
not even,
extreme.
or maybe she does sexual stuff, but that wasn't what I was doing with her, because how
You
I
were
said
doing
about
sexual
being
stuff with her? Sorry.
but like I was cut off from the
Uh,
neck down, the head down,
yeah.
the neck down, and so one of the first things I did with her was over Zoom. It was like a 3 week, I don't know what it was, like a little mini course,
Okay.
and we had to do a thing called Velvet Touch. And I couldn't do it. It was very hard for me to just touch, like close my eyes and touch myself. I can do it on my face because I spend a lot of time with
Oh,
skincare.
yeah.
So
You're an
touching,
esthetician. Skin
I'm
is
an
amazing.
esthetician. But in terms of my own body, like even just like doing this, like
Across your chest or down your arms.
so I had to have my camera off. I couldn't, it was just other women,
Okay.
and I would bawl my eyes out. I couldn't, we also did like dance, not like full on dancing, but just like movement to music and stuff. And um I could hardly do it. Fast forward through this, I went way the other way. We're in Sardinia, buck naked, in this like retreat in the middle of nowhere, and legs spread. Um, I
Not
mean, I
safe
don't know
for
how much
work.
detail I can go into, but
SW, not safe for
just
work.
healing more wounds, baby. Like a lot of tears, but a lot of laughter. Like I remember there was this well, there was this building and these women were in it. I don't know how much detail I can go
Were
into,
you
but
out?
you
Were
can.
you outside?
Oh, we were outside the whole time.
So a bunch of women naked outside, legs
Yep,
spread.
yeah. So there was this one, it was near the end. This was like the last day, and it just struck me as funny. Women from all over the world. And me and this other woman had finished up early. We were partners, and so you would lay down naked, and you had feathers, and they were directing you how to touch yourself down there
Okay.
and giving you praise, like, oh, she's, look at her opening up, she's so beautiful. So you're like falling in love with like touching yourself and pleasuring yourself and that kind of
Are we
thing.
talking masturbation or just like,
It's like masturbation,
yeah, okay.
but someone's telling you how to do it. You're getting directed.
Okay.
And so we finished up early. And so her and I are standing on the
How do you know you're
outside talking,
finished? Is my
like,
first question.
yeah, you're right. We're standing outside, and behind us, all these women are doing that. And we're having this mundane conversation about real estate. Like, it was just really, I don't know, it was so funny. It was so normalized by the end of it, right?
Yeah, that's so
Um,
funny.
but Meg's amazing. Everything she does is really amazing. And
That is, can I
yeah,
just say that is so brave. I do not think, and I'm not very modest, but yeah, I don't think I could do that. That's very brave. What
yeah,
did
it was
it
hard.
free? So you did something. So this is the thing. It sounds like you did something that was really scary and outside your comfort zone, outside the box, shall we say?
Yeah, only outside the box.
Oh, only
Nothing was
outside the
inside.
box. Okay. And but then you go back to but do you have like this awareness of like I can do scary things now? Like I can be
Yes.
brave. And so
Yes.
if you experience braveness in one area, you know that you can be brave in other areas. Is that sort of like the takeaway from something like that?
100%.
Okay.
And so I love the fact that I can drop into my body and it's juicy. Like that's one of the words that is in that sort of
Juicy.
world is like juicy, right? So
Man, the
like now,
boys, I know of a couple of listeners who are just going to be like, "Oh, this is not for me."
yeah, but it's great. Like I love my body and
That's
I
amazing.
can
You love
drop
your
into it.
body. Yeah, it used to be
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
dissociated from your body.
Oh, I hate even when I lost a lot of the weight still,
Still hated it.
I was angry and pissed off and I put some weight on. So I've gained like I went pretty low where I did lose 100 pounds and I put 20 back on.
Okay.
And it's,
But now you
I
feel
would have,
comfortable. Like this is a comfortable place for you.
yeah,
Yeah, love your body. That's a
love
man,
it.
that might be the title of the episode, How to Love Your Body in Sobriety.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, it's just great. Yeah, and then there is that element of I'm like, oh yeah, like if I can do that, like I can do that. And generally I'm more risk. People tell me I take risks. Like
You
I
do.
started a business and I don't have a lot of that risk aversion, I guess.
Yeah.
And but honestly, to me, the greatest achieve other than like, you can say my kids or whatever, but like on a totally, I don't
Whatever.
know, it's the sobriety.
Yeah.
It is really because it's the thing that makes everything else possible
Mm.
and enjoyable. Like, come on, like I want to have some fun. Like
Oh yeah.
play. Play is like that's kind of what I'm like exploring. Like that's what I'm working on right now is like what the hell is fun? Like
Yeah, let's
do I want to go
play.
climb a tree? Like, do I want to like how can I be playful and just in my daily life, even if I'm all alone, which I do love being alone, but
Mhm.
like how can I have fun and play and yeah, just try to enjoy the time I have. I'm on the second back half of my life if I'm lucky. So
Yeah.
let's have some fun.
That's like that Mary Oliver quote. What, dear one, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? Something like that.
Oh, yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I don't think I said it right, but I think that's the sentiment.
Just said it good.
What will you do? What will you do with your life? Yeah. I love this idea of play and rediscovering pleasure because I think a lot of times when people get sober, they don't realize that their dopamine reward circuit, it's a circuit. It's not just in your brain, it's in your gut. It's in, you know what I mean? It's a circuit. And people think that once you stop drinking, the fun is over. The pleasure is
Yeah,
over.
yeah,
And I think that's a really big misconception. It's actually the beginning because now you can actually feel. Whereas,
yes.
alcohol is it anesthetizes you, right? And so
Yeah.
this is the opposite of that. It's so funny. We're so confused about what fun is and what pleasure is. It's
You've
typically
got
the
to
exact opposite.
I mean, especially as I said, like drinking for decades, that was my fun. Like getting high
Yeah.
and getting drunk, that was my fun. And
Yeah.
so I'm fully rediscovering what's fun.
Yeah, rediscovering what's fun. And listen, you've shared so many really amazing things. I don't even know how I'm going to title this episode, but I'm right there with you with like, and thinking again about like play. I forget, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll play for a while. Like I have hobbies, like I have like the soap making hobby and making fun little
Mm,
videos, process
yeah, yeah.
videos on TikTok and stuff like that. And then I created this program. So I spent 4 months, and then I wrote a book. So it was like long stretches of just work, focused work. And then I forget to play. And so now
Oh, but
I'm,
is work like maybe work is fun for you though? Like, do you
well, I
enjoy?
do. So there's two things about work that I've realized is that I do love a challenge. I
Mm-hmm.
do love a challenge and I do like being creative. And work for me is
Yeah.
really creative. But there's a lot of stuff that comes with work, like redesigning a website, creating a program, doing all the, like, I know you've created programs and stuff. It's like, it's a lot of like actual work, focused work. It's like a to-do list that never ends.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Marketing is an activity that is really intense and never ends. social media. So
Yes.
these are, and social media is slippery for a lot of us because social media often lends to comparison, and
Yeah.
comparison is the thief of joy. It's the thief of joy. So it's like, how do we as entrepreneurs, you know, work? And because work can be all consuming as an entrepreneur. Like it's like you work 12, 14 hours a day for like $3 an hour. It ends up being, do you know what I mean?
Penny or nothing. Yeah.
Or nothing. Yeah. That's a whole nother under earning. I'm doing a little series on financial insecurity. We should maybe do round two around that. That would be really
Oh yeah.
workaholism. But yeah, so play is really up for me now. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront and, bringing forth your superpower. I love that you're doing all
Aw.
this work. If people are interested in connecting with you and learning more about like the things that you've done to get to where you are, or your coaching, anything like that, where can people find you?
Um, I was going to say social Instagram.
Yes, that's fair.
Like, well, I just not to go off on another tangent and but like I removed all social media apps because I was finding talk about building awareness, right? I
Yeah.
was like, every time I'm after Instagram, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
And I feel like that has become the new addiction. And now I'm sort of feeling slightly uncomfortable because I have no Instagram or I have nothing on my phone.
Yeah.
So I'm picking this thing up and then I'm like I'm putting
Oh,
it back down and then like
because
having to
it's
go sort of like wandering around like I stumbled outside. I went for a walk but so to answer your question, my Instagram is subtle underscore balance. If
what about you? Are you
I do check it.
okay? And I have a trick for you actually. I've learned to use social media distribution tools so that I can post but not be on it.
Very good.
Yeah, so I can still share content. And then there's a place in like Facebook that you can go to check all your messages so that you're not actually on social media, but you're managing it.
You'll have to tell me what tool
So I
that is that
use,
you're using.
in case anybody's interested, I use Buffer to distribute content. And then Facebook, there is a section in there where you can read all your comments and respond to comments so
Like
that you,
business suite or something, right?
yeah, yeah. So that you're
Okay.
not actually, you're using social media, but you're not actually on it. Because I found that if I try to, and I still do it, but if I respond to comments or look to see who's liked or how many likes or whatever, that makes me feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I still feel the need to distribute content, but not participate in it. So it's kind of like
Yeah,
a condom,
that's
a
fair.
social media condom.
Yeah,
Social, these tools
the
are like social media.
prophylactic,
Yeah, social media prophylactics. Maybe that'll be the
the
episode title.
buffer. Yeah, that's good. I like
Yeah,
that.
it's called Buffer. Yeah. It's a buffer. Well, my dear, listen, I love you dearly. I
Oh,
just
I love
am
you.
so proud of you. Well, you have just blossomed and flourished, and you look amazing. That's just
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, it's just like I was gonna say frosting on a cake, but we don't do sugar anymore. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think about you all the time.
Mm,
I'm very introverted and so, I don't reach out often, but I do think about you all the time. It's like you say you meet someone, I mean, you completely changed my life and I can take some of that credit, but I do give some of that credit to you too. So, um
Thank you. Well, I received
yeah.
that, and you did. I have to tell you, you do bring out, there's something about you that brings out the best in me. So I
Hmm.
really value you because of that and appreciate you.
Like we had a love-in on top of a
Yeah.
podcast. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that makes me feel really
Add
good.
that to your pleasure diet.
Oh, I should. I'll never forget this. The best.
All right, my dear. I could talk to you all day, but I just really appreciate everything that you shared. I think it's so important. You do have a sober social superpower, and I'm just really grateful for this time we got to spend together. So I'll look
Okay.
forward to
Thank you.
hanging out again soon.
Okay. Yes. Thanks, Arlena.